Okay.
Welcome to a Saturday morning, and it means it is time for Cynthia Hash to take us on a tour of the reality of real estate. And busy, busy times. I know the national convention, you guys, up in D.C. and all sorts of things going on with the National Association of Realtors. And I said it right this time. I don't want to get another letter with a fine in it. But Cynthia, good morning. How are you doing this Saturday?
Great. You remember last week we were talking about being June?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we just got our personal property tax bills.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah. And there's some communities, Albemarle County said this is just for the first half of the year. I'm like, whoa, how bad is it if you're only going to get hitting us for a half a year?
That's exactly right. And it is just the half a year. And you know what's fun is they always do it right in the middle of vacation time in June, and it's
Hmm.
due again Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Somebody should
what?
have sat down with somebody and said, let's work on a time, maybe September and March,
Yeah,
not so much going
something
on.
better.
Yeah.
Something better. Oh, anyway.
And it's
Well,
always the good news, bad news. Hey, we have good news. Your property's more valuable. You're also going to pay us more in taxes.
yes. Good news,
But
bad
aren't you
news. That's
happy about your property being more valuable?
I know. And they get you coming and going because you pay grantor's taxes for as a seller for real estate. You pay all the taxes that in order to record your deed of trust. You when you buy, you pay and when you buy a vehicle, same thing, you pay taxes, and you have a it's essentially a tax
Hmm.
to have your inspection and your and whatever the stickers that you need for your car. It's
Yeah.
like ridiculous. So, and it keeps going and going and going.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh my God. And then you could buy a new car, God forbid.
That one's well, and that's they just love that. It's
Yeah.
because the taxes, and then of course then the debate begins. How do you tax the electric vehicles
Hmm.
and then do you get a solar if you have solar panels on your home? I know there's rebates for that,
Yeah.
and then then you're not using as much electricity, so then are you paying the taxes on that? It just becomes crazy making.
It
Last week
does.
you were talking about the market may be radically different by the end of this year than it was last year, just a year ago. Um, you know, I know you want to talk about that kind of shifting in how the market is going.
Yeah.
Is it a shift or is it noticeably dynamic?
So, well, that's a loaded question, of course.
That's what they pay me extra
Hey,
for.
that's right. That's right. There you go. But it's a shifting market. It's not as fast as you might think, which is good because you don't want it to go too fast.
Hmm.
But what we're going to go over is what to expect and how to handle it.
Okay.
And so, because that is something that, do you remember I told you, I think you and I talked about it before, where buyers now need to earn 70% more than they did 6 years ago in order to buy a home?
Yes. Yep.
Hmm. That is real. And so, so the why, okay, this is where common sense isn't common. Um, so why would any seller want to overprice their property? You're just shooting yourself in the foot if you're overpriced.
Well, does a seller sit down with someone like you? So they call Find Homes Realty, and Cynthia comes out, and I presume you sit down and you have a discussion. Is it we need to have this much because we need to buy something else, or we need to have this much because we feel like the house is worth it, or is it all of the above?
It can be all of the above. And I'll tell you, there's some people that just get themselves into this cycle of credit card expenses that they're only paying the minimum amount each month instead of paying it off each month. So don't buy it unless you can pay it off in 30 days. And
Okay.
that's the way I look at it. And or okay, if you get 12 months of let's say you got 12 months on your vehicle and you're buying a new vehicle, or you're remodeling your bathroom or something
Hmm.
like that. If you have 0% interest, then go for it and pay it like that, because it's always nice to use someone else's money, right?
Hmm. Especially if you
Um,
got a good rate. I mean, but our
yeah.
mailboxes are filled with, you've been approved for this card. And then you look and it's 28%, 29% interest rates. And you're,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, or even if it's 12, it's just way too much. It's
Mhm.
ridiculous. And so when that happens, they get into this never-ending cycle of never being able to pay off the principal of that credit card. And that's called revolving credit, right?
Hmm.
And so when they do that, it can actually get some of these people who are trying to sell, it can actually get them in a pickle to the point where they have to sell.
Hmm.
Because if they don't, they're going to end up having to claim bankruptcy at some point.
Yeah.
And that's such a sad thing. But home sellers, when you overprice, here's what's happening. Sellers have currently an unrealistic price expectation right now, and they're setting themselves up for basically pain in a softening market, which is going to eventually and increasingly favor buyers.
Hmm. That's what
And
you were saying last week.
exactly. And so during the shifting market, which I think we are in right now, sellers are usually behind the times, and buyers usually catch on quicker.
Hmm.
They do. And that's why buyers are the ones that actually dictate what the market will bear. They're
Is
the
it because
ones.
is it because they're bargain hunting? They're trying to get the most for the most for the best bargain, I guess is what you're calling it.
Sort of, kind of, but
Hmm.
typically a seller's not sitting at home or on their cell phone or whatever getting emails from their agent or from whatever platform they enjoy seeing, looking at houses on, and they're usually not the ones doing that. The buyers are. So the buyers are getting, oh wow, this thing in my phone's going off a little more frequently now. And so that's why they get probably a without really doing it on purpose, they actually get a head start in knowing that a shift is coming. And so, yeah, but I would say probably one of your biggest things is just just don't hire the wrong agent, because most consumers don't even know how to interview agents. They just don't know what to ask an agent.
Hmm.
And what they'll do is something silly, like, I'm just going to get the agent that's going to tell me my house is worth the most.
Oh yeah. I can see that happening to somebody.
Yeah. And what that does is, you are basically, who are you bargaining against at that point? You're bargaining against yourself. You're negotiating against yourself,
Hmm.
in the long run, because you don't when you are in a shifting market, you don't want to end up overpricing and then turning it into you being the seller chasing the market
Is
as it's
that
going down.
does that really happen where all of a sudden you think you're going to get something and you don't?
Yeah, it's where you price it, you know, $20,000 more than your agent suggested.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, well, it's okay because, the 1970s attitude or 80s attitude, where we can price it whatever we want to price it, and we'll just keep coming down whenever but no, what's going to happen is you're going to end up on days on market a lot longer. You're going to end up, basically, like I said, shooting yourself in the foot, because when you are chasing the market, it in the market is going to do what it's going to do, and the buyers are going to pay what they're going to pay, and when you're chasing the market, it means that you're never going to catch up.
Hmm. Okay.
So you should have started at the bottom half at the beginning, in order to, of what the so let's say your agent gives you, a 50,000 or not that much, shouldn't be that much, but a $30,000 range.
Okay.
Well, go to the bottom of the $30,000 range. Start there. And because right now what's happening is we're still getting multiple offers, but that might change as we go along. And I mentioned that a little bit last week as well. But
Mm,
ask some of these types of questions. Number one, ask your agent, when were you licensed? And when or how long have you been active in the market? And
okay.
by the way, were you active during the boom of 2005, or were you active during the Great Recession of 2008?
I can see why that would those scars are going to be well earned, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. And so ask those questions. And ask them, how many hours do they put in strictly regarding real estate? Be,
Interesting. Yeah.
yep, because probably about 85% of the agents out there are part-time.
I didn't know that high.
Yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
doggone high. And part of the reason is this is a hard job to get into. It's a hard career to make a go of. And and if they're not working, if but maybe 10, 15 hours a week in real estate, then how well do you think they can truly market your property, represent you, negotiate, and so forth? It's just too much to um, ask a part-timer to really do.
Hmm.
It's really bad quite frankly, I don't go anywhere where I don't have a good internet connection because
Oh,
if I take off a few days for vacation, I want to still be available, especially for emergencies for my clients.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I,
And
I'm surprised people don't think of that, but that's a good question though.
and you got to ask them, do you have another job outside of real estate?
You know,
You know, I- say, okay, if they're bartending and you're not going to be able to get a hold of them until at least noon the next day.
right? No, oh, yeah, or you can't go, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock to go look at something because they've got another gig, or
That's right.
if something comes up, they can't just drop everything on a Thursday and go look at it with you. You're pretty locked into the days you can go.
Yeah, pretty much so. And if they do have that other job, it's I mean, it's okay. That's where they are, but they're not going to get the experience that you need for the largest transaction that you're ever going to make in your entire life.
Hmm.
And also ask them how many units they've sold in their career. Like, for example, with the CRS designation, I had to prove that I sold over 600 units in a
Wow,
10-year span.
interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of thing. And you can ask them too, what kind of certifications and designations do you have, and letters of achievement and things of that nature. And, the letters behind the name do make a difference. Um, those kinds of things with the reason why they make a difference is because you do have to prove your prowess in the industry.
Hmm.
And so it does mean something. And and ask them what was their average price range that they sell. And I'll be honest with you, you know, uh, $10,000 I think was my first sale in 1999.
Wow.
And it was $10,000 and it was a rickety old house and it was in the city and it was very interesting because only that's the only character that would have bought it, not Swanee.
And now the house assesses at $400,000, and
Oh, easy. Yeah. Oh, easy.
but
And
what happens if you start asking these questions and a potential realtor starts to bristle like, "Hey, what is this? What am I
mm,
on trial here?
yeah.
what should that tell you if they don't want to answer these questions?"
Well, I'm sure most people don't ask them. Therefore, they're going to not know how to react. So
Hmm.
they're going to sit back and go, oh, well, yeah, well, I've been licensed for 6 months and I, you know, and this will be my first deal and, that
Wow.
kind of thing. And so if, if that happens, the best thing to do is sometimes if they're part of a team and you have a very active principal broker, but I would say not very many principal brokers are actually active. Part of the
Oh.
reason is because they're busy running the show, so to speak, in the for the brokerage.
Mhm.
But you just ask them what their value proposition is. Maybe to give them all credit where credit's due, maybe their value proposition is the fact that they actually, like when I started, I was a title insurance underwriter for many years
Okay.
beforehand, and I also worked for a settlement company. So if they are coming right out of that, or maybe coming out of banking, or maybe coming out, something that might be tangible and somewhat sort of kind of related. Maybe they were a lender at some point, and now they're moving into this area. So to give credit where credit's due, there might be something that they're just simply burned out in another career that's similar, uh,
Mhm.
and they just want to start doing real estate in a
Mhm.
more forefront kind of way. And also, here's a great one. Ask
Mhm.
about how would they explain the NAR class action lawsuits?
No, I'm not sure I know how I would explain it, but then again, I'm not trying to sell somebody's house for them.
Right. And I remember when we first started with each other, that was one of the things that we went over quite a bit.
Hmm.
And
It's a big news story.
it was, but it was also, uh, do you really truly understand it? And can you really truly explain it? And how does that matter? Why does that matter? The reason it matters is because you want to make sure that that person has their finger on the pulse of the real estate market and on the
Mm.
pulse of everything that they're supposed to be doing, whether it be by the code of ethics or the changes that have been made, and the alterations that they have to alter their business model, things like that. And if they can't thoroughly and understandably explain the class action lawsuits, then I they might not even know what you should or shouldn't do as a seller, and
Hmm.
and that kind of thing, and what's best for you, and what would their advice actually be. And
Or what are the trends in the market? I mean, if they're not aware of one
exactly.
of the bigger news stories in the market, or are they aware that things are going towards the other side now, and it's not
Hmm.
people showing up with bags of cash, buying, houses 40% over asking price?
Yeah, yeah.
What about those folks? And I sort of, I survived them. I guess I just got lucky. I found a place that they weren't interested in. Um, but I remember those, it's only a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and the height of the people were just showing up and buying rental properties with cash because they had it left over when they
Hmm.
bought their farm or whatever, but they were overpaying for all these houses. Is that going to still impact the market? Will somebody say, well, I paid this much for it, whether it currently assesses at that value or not? How is that going to affect a realtor? If somebody says, well, I paid, 40% more than I should have, but I want to get that back out.
Well, this is why you need that person who literally has experienced the boom of 2005 and experienced the Great Recession of 2008.
Hmm.
Because during the Great Recession, there were a lot of REOs, which is real estate owned uh, properties. There were a lot of short sales. There
Oh
were,
yeah.
yes, and there were a lot of people that going through bankruptcy. There were a lot of people that it was a painful time. And during that period, if you don't have somebody that actually knows about that and not just knows about it but lived it, then it's way more difficult to be able to explain what the future may be. Because I can remember being told by clients in 2005, either you write the offer on the trunk of your car,
Wow.
yep, or I'm going to find somebody who will because I want this house and I'm ready to pay basically 103% because that's when lenders were lending out 103% so that it could pay their closing costs.
Wow. Yeah, I
It was
remember it
crazy.
was there were a lot of deals out there at the time. And underwater, people were
Mm,
underwater in homes and stuff. So,
yeah.
you've answered one of the questions. You have been. So I'm going back over your questions and
Yeah.
thinking, should I be asking Cynthia these? I was never good at picking up signals from other people, but but you are, you said this is Cynthia Hash is Find Homes Realty. I mean, this isn't part time for you. This is
Nope.
everything you do.
It is, and it has been a labor of love. And I will say that if you are not a good problem solver or a good negotiator, you're going to fail your clients.
Mhm.
And so make sure that if you're a buyer or seller, that you get someone who is a crackerjack negotiator and problem solver. And I think that's part of what people don't understand either. They get into people they get into a situation where they go, "Oh, I wish I would have hired an agent."
Yeah.
And just don't just pick the agent who happens to be, on the sign in the house of the house that you want to go see either. So or don't pick the agent who might be your cousin who just got licensed. You,
Yeah.
don't just because they think it's easy money because it could really hurt you in the long run. You're gonna lose something. You're gonna lose some sort of negotiating strategy or something. It won't play for you. It will play more like against you.
It,
Also, your neighbor. Your neighbor knows everything, right?
you know my neighbor, really. I didn't know that.
But your neighbor goes, oh no, use this one, use this agent, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Do your homework and check online, make sure they have all the things that we just mentioned. And and you're and guess what? 9 out of 10 times you probably have a neighbor right down the street that's also licensed
Oh,
and you never knew it.
right, because you've never looked. And as you mentioned, this is going to be your biggest investment ever, but it's also
Right.
not something you do a lot. So you don't know. I mean, if you know where the dry cleaner is, you know who makes deli sandwiches, but do you
Yeah.
really know who's a realtor?
Yeah.
What about you mentioned being a negotiator? I imagine the hard part is telling somebody, "I'm sorry, you can't get that for what you want." How is it harder to work with the seller or coach your buyer if you're trying to buy them a home
That's
as a
really a good question. I think it's because, well, it depends because buyers will and sellers will eventually learn a lesson that they should have listened to their hired realtor.
Mhm.
Um, because when you do hire the right agent, listen to them, and because they know more than you do, and you think you might know more, and you think you might not need an agent, but I think you actually truly do, and there is benefits. If they end up not list if they the buyer or the seller uh end up you have to be able to gently say things because quite frankly you can just they'll go, no, I'm digging my heels in. I'll tell you an example. The had this one character who was very very lovely couple and enjoyed serving them, but I was the listing agent at the time, and I ended up I told them, I said, okay, they're getting a radon inspection as well as a regular home inspection. And they
Okay.
said, okay, whatever that is.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And so they were and it came back really high. It came into double digits.
Yeah, that
Yes,
is high.
that's pretty high. And so usually you have to do something, some sort of remediation with if it's 4 picocuries per liter over that, if it's over that, or that or over, I should say.
Hmm.
And so the the seller, my client, said, "Well, I'm not going to do anything." And I'm like, "Well, let me at least get an estimate." Well, I don't care. I'm not going to do anything.
Wow.
And I said, but I need to tell you something. This is a real thing. You might think it's not, and you've been living here for 30 years, but these buyers and any other buyer is gonna want to know
Mm,
about radon. Well, I got the estimate and it was reasonable, even though they had to make multiple cuts and so forth in order to put the pipes in.
mhm.
And he says, I'm not ruining my basement for, blah, for all these pipes and whatnot. And I'm like, hey, this guy is a pro. I know him. He's really good at what he does, and he'll make the pipe as unseen as possible.
Right.
And I believe that you'll be pleased with it. But guess what? You have your foot out, one out the door and one on a banana peel. So why don't we just fix this house for the next person who's going to enjoy it? And the next person has children, and they don't want their kids growing up in the house for 30 years with radon.
Hmm.
And so it was like, it wasn't even much. It was like 1,400 bucks, 1,800 bucks at the most. And when I said, listen, this isn't going to cost you $1,800 if you try to sell it again. We can put it back on the market because I know that's what you want to do. And he was telling me all this stuff. There was, radon, schmadon, and we don't care. And then what happened was I said, I'm afraid this is probably going to be about a 10 or $15,000 mistake. And he said, what? And I said, yeah, if you are not willing to do this, we now have a situation where we have to disclose these results to
Hmm.
someone else if this person decides to get out of the contract. Well, the seller still dug his heels in and he still said, no, I'm not going to do it and put it back on the market. Checked with the buyer. Buyer said, we're not, if it has radon like that high double digits kind of stuff, we're not budging. We're getting out of the contract.
Yeah. Show
Sorry.
me something else.
So, right, exactly. And so the buyer was represented by another agent and they left and we put it back on the market. And I kid you not, it was took several weeks afterwards. And the next offer that we got was $10,000 below what the first offer was.
But like you said, now you have said since the onset of this program, you have a very strict code of ethics in your agency, but that works both ways. I mean, it is going and coming for folks. They know that you're going to give them the straight poop when they're buying a home, but also selling it as well. And it looks
That's
like
exactly right.
you were right again.
And the unfortunate part was that he not only had to do it was $10,000 less, but he still had to fix the radon.
Oh gosh, so it's even more. It's
Yes.
it's doubled over. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so those are just simple examples of, uh, hey, listen to your agent. They
Hmm.
do know more than you do, and you might not think so, but it's the daggone truth.
Well, that's why
And
it's trust. It's a trust issue. It has to be.
it is. And we're not, a lot of people think that they put us in with used car salesmen and 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 lawyers, and all they want is, the commission or the hourly rate or the money,
Oh
and all
my
this kind of
gosh.
stuff. That is not it. That's why we do have the NAR Code of Ethics. That's why Find Homes Realty does have the our own uh, not just it's the Code of Ethics is NAR, okay?
Hmm.
We have our own credible uh, uh, code that is not having to do with NAR. It is even more strict in regards to what we do for you.
Hmm.
And that is very important to us. And and it's a clear, we want to be consistent,
Hmm.
and we want to make sure that you get the proper service that you need, and we're going to be straight up honest with you no matter what. And it
That's it.
is mhm, it's really something that I think people need to understand, that it's so important to have an agent who has a stricter code of ethics even than the National Association of Realtors.
Find Homes Realty. Cynthia, you have a